just before we went off? I don't know if you want to continue.
Yeah, so the topic we just left or we're talking about was additional support needs and the rise in additional support needs. And I thought it was only appropriate that I came in that because it was leading to some discussions within education. Education absolutely identifying more learners with additional support needs in our schools. So in a sense, we're often getting better at that, which I think is a positive in that we can then come with the correct support and the correct strategies. The vast majority of these strategies and supports will just take place in the class that learners are in, with the class teachers and the learning assistants that do a grand job in supporting the learners. But at times, yeah, it does lead to specialist supports, thinking speech and language supports, supports from educational psychology, but absolutely having the family round about that support, that would be our strategy to do that with partners, review the supports and make sure they're making a difference and helping. So for practitioners, and teachers and learning assistants, there's a lot of support that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that we're up to speed with best practice to support learners. So there's a bit about keeping the profession really the resources that we have really in the front foot to support learners. And that's where Gillian was starting to talk about some changes. So we're aware that we've got learners that have autism in our schools, of course. We've got specialist provisions in primary and secondary to support that, but we're still seeing some learners with so complex needs that they're finding it hard to access our very flexible learning environments that we've created. So a very small number that Gillian was talking about that we're working really hard with social work and partners from Autism Scotland to better meet the needs, because some of these learners are finding it hard to enter more of the formal learning settings that we have. And that is leading to some really good partnership work through our family centre, for example, with Autism Scotland and social work. And we're getting some extra funding from the Scottish Government that's came in the last 6 months, so the tune about 260,000. And we're looking to make sure that we've got that sort of wraparound or reach out team for these learners that I've just described, for them and their families to get the support that they absolutely need to thrive educationally and at home. And we're trying to adapt it so it's not just term time, because we find that sometimes the term time the supports are there, things are fairly settled, and then come the summer holidays, long time off, the pressure on some of the families and on the individuals sets back at times. We have to make sure that that's not experienced. So to change in needs, I think since coming out of COVID, we've seen certain rise. We've adapted between 6 to 8 flexible learning spaces where there is capacity in our schools. These are classrooms that are highly staffed but low pupil numbers to better meet some of the needs of the changes that we're seeing with additional support needs. So I'm really keeping track of that additional support needs, what the need is, and making sure the resource and the expertise follows that. And just lastly, it's important that our curriculum doesn't just best prepare people for university, it's preparing all our learners to support them on their journey. And I think that's something we always have to go back to. We're supporting all our learners and their families and not just getting them ready for SQA exams. And I think that sometimes is a pressure point. Learners with additional support needs do achieve at that level, but we've got learners that thrive in our schools and do great things that are maybe not on that path. And it's just making sure that we are meeting all that full range of needs. Okay. Thanks.
I think that's an excellent point, well made, Colin. I think it's really important to understand, yes. So thanks for raising that. Do we have any other questions from any of the committee? Nope. Well, I'm very happy to move this paper. I think it's extremely high standard of a paper again in terms of the comprehensive nature of it, but also it's really encouraging to see the excellent work that's taken place, and I often say it, but the really innovative work that's taken place, where we're really meeting the needs of our communities. So thank you very much for that. And I think, Councillor Earle, you want to come in and second the paper?
Yes, I'm quite happy to move to second this paper. You can see from the depth that this report has went into, just how much work there is behind it, and an excellent report from an excellent service. So thank you very much, and I'm quite happy to second this.
Thanks, Councillor Errol. So the paper's now open for debate. Would anybody like to debate the paper? Nope. Happy to note the paper? Okay, thanks so much. Thanks to the whole team. I think that's been, and Sharon and all the team for that work. It's been amazing. So thank you. So we will now move on to item 7, which is the Health and Safety Annual Report. Report by the Health and Safety Manager. And sorry, I'm frantically looking to see who is coming in at this point.
It's myself.
Sean.
Thanks so much. I lost my bit of paper there. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The paper as presented provides for committee noting and comment the annual report on health and safety performance across the Council for the financial year 2024-25. As an employer and service provider, we have a legal duty to ensure the health and safety of our staff and anyone who may be affected by our work. The report presented highlights the broad range of operational work undertaken by our health and safety team throughout the 2024-2025 period. The work undertaken included the development or review of 11 policies, completion of 602 health surveillance checks, 58 risk profile meetings, 23 audit visits to council sites, and the delivery of 77 training courses. The report also provides information on overall performance, including accident data, audits undertaken, training delivered, occupational health provision, uptake of our employee assistance programme, stress risk assessments conducted, as well as an overview of our priority areas for improvement. The committee are asked to note section 3.2 of the report, which outlines that there has been no enforcement action against the council, and this is the second year that this achievement has been maintained. The committee are also asked to note that there were no significant accidents or incidents that required health and safety executive follow-up. The report overall shows the positive and critical work that our health and safety team continue to do to ensure that staff and service users are kept safe. Senior Manager of HR and Workforce Development and I are happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thanks very much. Can I ask one question on page 127, and it's about the number of incidents reported, and it was referred to then in page 128 that the highest type of incident was physical assaults, with over 97% of those taking place within educational establishments. And we've raised this before, but I just wondered, you know, in terms of these incidents, with the training plan there, what level of training is there for people in terms of personal safety in challenging situations? And is that part of the training programme, or will it be part of the training programme?
It is absolutely part of our training programme. We've recently engaged with the NHS, who also experienced similar types of issues. So it was 5 members of staff from across the council undertook training from the NHS to then roll out a programme of training across council services, so that the training for the trainers took place in August, and we've started to roll that programme out already, and there's more dates coming up in the coming months, and that is being well received by staff who are already undertaking that course.
Thank you. Colin, were you wanting to come in on that as well?
I don't know if it's Elma's in front of me. I'm okay to go ahead. Yeah, okay. Just to put into a bit of context, because I know it does seem quite stark, and it's one that does stand out. And yeah, so we've definitely seen a rise in violence and aggression incidents being reported in our schools and in our ELCs. And where that happens most, if I looked at them, would probably be our provisions. So we've got obviously, you know, Lockie's School, we've got Alva, ASD and ASD Secondary, so 3 specialist provisions. When I look at the time these reported, and it will be last year, so if I look at August to October last year, when it's at its highest, and I compare it to this year, August to October, we're seeing a 13.5 reduction against staff. So there's a reduction in that compared to last year and coming out of COVID. And then a 43% reduction of young people hitting out probably at each other rather than a teacher or someone else. So the first one was to do with teachers and staff, the other one was to do there. So for the same period, some of the strategies that go behind the scenes to help support this and reduce it are making a difference this year, are better, and that's what's really important, because we certainly saw changes of young people, and particularly the provisions in P1, P2 ELC, the early stages of learning, that communication that they've probably missed throughout COVID playing out in a certain way that led to violence and aggression. But yes, they're still high and we've still got work to do, but I think that that's an encouraging sign that some of the strategies are actually working. I hope that helps. So there's, out of all the schools, 12 had significantly reduced the numbers, and others we continue to support.
That's really helpful. Thanks very much, Colin. Chris, were you wanting to come in on that one as well?
Because Alistair,
it was just myself, Chair. I just wanted to come in just to further on Sean's point about the approach that's been taken to violence and aggression training. I mean, I wanted to emphasise and recognise that although that is a challenge within education, it is present across a range of services within the council. Now, the approach that the health and safety team are seeking to implement, Sean has already mentioned that it's a train the trainer approach. So we have in-house trainers that are now trained to deliver those sessions. Now, the benefit that gives us is we can respond to the nuance in what those the experiences of violence and aggression are across those different services. So whereas in the past we might have taken a rigid course that would come from an external provider, we now have the experience and the expertise in-house across that health and safety team in order for us to respond to the different types of violence and aggression that are being experienced across different service areas. So it's a really worthwhile and interesting approach that's been taken with that. So I just thought it'd be worth highlighting to committee today.
Well, thanks so much for that. That's really helpful and good to hear. Councillor Forson, you want to come in?
Yeah, the report is referring a bit to developing a stronger health and safety culture across the council. I'm just wondering how we're going to measure that cultural change and how we're really going to know that, you know, it's becoming embedded rather than it just being, you know, a compliance kind of thing on the front line.
Yep, so there is a lot of work and a lot of research that's been done around this, and we did a study, trying to think back, I think it was 2023 that we carried out a kind of benchmarking study to see where we were at that point. Our intention is to repeat that again early next year and at, you know, further points in the future, and that gives us a good indication of whether we are progressing as we would like. So yeah, to explain it looks at various aspects of health and safety. It asks a number of people across the organisation, so that it's not just in one particular area or one particular level within the organisation. So we try to get engagement from a good cross section to make sure that you know, what we're reporting is accurate right across, rather than just finding a pocket of excellence that maybe might skew the results.
Okay, Councillor Harrison, you wanted to come in? You're on mute, Councillor Harrison.
Sorry about that. I wish I had £1 for every time somebody's actually said that to me over the last few years. I know we're going to be meeting on Monday afternoon, so I'll kind of keep this brief because I think we'll probably delve into it more on Monday. But I'm just looking at toolbox talks and staff attendance levels. Do we make these mandatory and keep a record or you know, a signer of people who have turned up? Because, you know, 24, 25, it looks like in the table that only 343 staff attended toolbox talks. Is that right?
Yeah, so it depends on what the subject of the toolbox talk is. Some we would expect to be received by colleagues right across the council, but others are more specific to particular areas or particular types of work. What the work that we undertook with the skills risk profiling exercise will helping us inform that going forward. So hopefully in future we'll be able to give a much better indication of how many we would have expected to undertake after our toolbox talk, and then get a better understanding of whether we've, whether we're at or close to the mark or whether we've got big gaps.
Yeah, just the one that kind of jumps out was the manual handling. So we had 14 incidents of manual caused by manual handling. But when you look at the manual handling toolbox talk, only 12 people turned up. Now, manual handling, whether you're working in an office, you might be picking up paper, you might be doing something, or you're working in, in the roads team. I would have thought manual handling should have been mandatory for everybody in the council. It's just one that jumps out at me. But, as I say, we can pick this up kind of next week when we have a catch up. But yeah, I'm just really interested to see why it was so low on toolbox talks and stuff like that. But I think in general, a lot of the stuff's pretty good. As you say, I think the culture probably are really interesting, want to get into to see how we can better the culture and people's thinkings around about health and safety and improve on that. So yeah, but thanks for that.
Do we have any other questions on that? No. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Sinead, for the report. I think it's incredibly comprehensive again. But one of the things that I noted just from my time on audit and scrutiny is the improvements that have taken place in terms of the take up with health and safety training courses, with the improvements in all the different areas. And on the action table, most actions were achieved, which I felt was really positive. So really pleased to see that when we've been scrutinising these reports, obviously, for some time, to see the area of move forward and improvement. So thanks so much to the team for all the great work that's going forward on that. So like I say, I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Harrison? Just formally second? We're open to, yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I kind of agree with what you're saying there, Janine. It does look positive. I was nominated as the health and safety ambassador from the council or group, and I'm meeting next Monday to have a first chat on that. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I think mostly positive. I see where we're going. I see what we're trying to do. So yeah, happy to second.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Scott. We're now open to debate. Would anybody like to debate the paper? Nope. Happy to note. Okay, thanks everybody. And thanks so much for that report. Thank you. So we'll now move on to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers, Scotland Act 2000, report by Senior Manager, Legal and Governance, and that I found my bit of paper. So that's Sarah Goldberg. So over to you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Convener, and good morning, councillors. This report updates the Committee on the Council's use of the regulation of the Investigatory Powers Scotland Act, which we niftily refer to as RIPSA. In limited circumstances, it might be necessary for the council officers in the course of their duties to make observations of a person in a covert manner, i.e. without a person's knowledge. Such actions may potentially be deemed intrusive and may give rise to legal challenge. And just to emphasise, RIPSA doesn't give the council any extra powers of surveillance, but what it does is it controls the use of the existing investigative powers, and that tends to relate to duties such as trading standards investigations, environmental health investigations, or antisocial behaviour investigations. RIPSA was introduced to make sure that such surveillance was properly regulated and to ensure compliance with human rights legislation. And there are statutory codes of practice which sit alongside the Act. The Council has a RIPSA policy in place, and along with staff guidance and standard forms which can be found on Connect, these require to be completed by the officer seeking the request. They're checked by the Council's RIPSA coordinating officer, who's Evelyn Patterson, the Senior Governance Officer, before submission to the authorising officers. Now, they are either the Chief Executive or any of the 3 directors for approval. Just to be clear, that cannot be delegated further down the chain within the Council. So a RIPSA application can only be approved or refused by the authorising officers. So there's effectively a two-staged internal process, and it's fairly straightforward and streamlined. As I said, the forms can be found on Connect. So the council is subject to an inspection on the use of its RIPSA powers every 3 years. The body's called the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office. Our last inspection took place in January 2025, and that required completion of questions and the provision of proof of compliance. The next inspection isn't due until January 2028. I just think with reference to the report, I'd be particularly drawing your attention to paragraph 3.3. Paragraph 3.3 notes that there was only one authorisation requested under RIPSA, but this wasn't progressed since the last inspection. And also for committee to note paragraph 3.5, that training for authorising officers and the RIPSA coordinating officer that had been required by an early investigation report has now been completed. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. Do we have any questions? Nope. So you've explained that really well, which is obviously why everybody's shocked into silence. But no, thank you very much. I'm happy to move the report. I think it's a difficult area to understand. I think you've explained it really well there, so it gives me a really better understanding of it, and also interesting to read. So thank you for that. Can I have a seconder, please? Ellen, yep.
I'm happy to formally second it. It's a short and sweet report there, just how we like them. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. We're now open to debate. Would you like to debate the paper? Nope. We're happy to note the paper. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks, Sarah. Sorry we didn't get much questioning or anything, but thank you for coming along and thanks for the report. So we'll now move on to procurement annual report, and that is going to be presented by Derek Barr. Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. It's a pleasure to be here again. This is my 11th report that I've presented to you. I'm delighted to do so. The Procurement Reform Act requires us to prepare an annual report on an annual basis on our regulated procurement activities, and as soon as reasonably practical, and because of the way that we capture our data, etc., this is about the first time that we can actually get this to committee. So it gives you some updates on the key procurement activities, etc., and it just kind of gives you a snapshot of everything that's organised within Clackmannanshire Council. It's submitted once it's approved, if it's approved, right, to the Scottish Government, and that's also part of the Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014. So they actually have to make a submission along with some data that gets sent to them. So apologies for the not the short and sweet report, but you know that I don't do a short and sweet report. I try to give you a lot of information. It has been looked over in the last few years by the Scottish Government, and it has been seen as being very informative to them as well as ourselves. So hopefully you found it interesting, and I'm very happy to take some questions wherever you feel free.
Thanks so much, Derek, and thanks. Yeah, it's a brilliant report. Every time that you give it to us, it's got loads of information. So I'll hand over to Councillor Forson.
Yeah, thanks. And Derek, you know, there's some reports that you don't want to be short and sweet, and this is one of them. So I'm always pleased to see all the information in there. I was particularly interested in the community benefits requirements. There's quite a few contracts which have included community benefit clauses, and I'm just wondering, can you give us some more information on what measurable outcomes have come from them, so like jobs, training, subcontracts, etc., that have benefited Clackmannanshire? And I am interested in how we manage to follow up to make sure the companies actually are providing on these benefits, because it'd be quite easy for them to say they're going to do something and then not necessarily do it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem at all. a very fascinating question, because you'll see this gets picked up in a paper that's coming out from the internal audit later on. It actually mentions community benefits, because there's been a recent audit done on community benefits for the council. So that's been really helpful. And part of that audit actually showed some of the limitations that we had with regard to that, and obviously we've picked up in the audit, and we've seen that as being very important. So part of that, where we identified some of the areas of improvement, we've taken it really quite seriously, and we've agreed actions. We've got recommendations, and obviously you'll get an updated report on that. I think it's done every 6 months or so. So part of that was to improve the monitoring and reporting of the community benefits, which hopefully will get to where you are. We're starting to provide better guidance and training for procurement officers to embed community benefits, because it's really important. Right? And obviously we've been doing some supplier engagement to try and ensure that these commitments are actually being realistic and, exactly as you're asking, being delivered. One of the actions that also came from that was that this annual report didn't actually comply with the requirements of the reporting elements of this for the Reform Act. And we've addressed that actually in this report. And what we've done here is that we've taken the Public Contracts Scotland tool that's actually available to anyone, right, and applied the contracts that, when we go through a governance process, we've applied them into that particular platform. But what it does do is it highlights and says what's the community benefits that are expected. But it also tells you the suppliers, right, and it tells you where and when that's supposed to happen. The tool has not had the functionality until recently to say, well, has that been achieved? But it's recently had a little tweak to it, right, and it has got that, but it's not done automatically. It has to be done from the officers. So for this report, I've retrospectively contacted all the officers to establish, to see, did that actually happen? And that's what's reflected. I think it's on page 181 of this report that you can see there. So there has been a number of things delivered off the back of that. One thing I would note for you is that, and it's quite hard for us, is that we are obliged to obviously take it on legally if there's a contract above £4 million, right? And then in the financial year that we're doing this report, there were none at all. But it doesn't mean that we can't apply that whole system to anything below that where it's appropriate, and that's the ones that you can see here as well. The other interesting thing that you get, and I haven't been able to totally quantify this yet, but I'm working my way through it, is that with some of the Scotland Excel contracts, they already pre-do a community benefit thing, and it's based on a points-based scheme. And depending on how many points you've got, you can buy certain things for the community. But that goes back to the services for them to apply that and say, look, I've got 5 points, so this means you're planting 10 trees or whatever it happens to be. But we're doing that as well. So it's all getting called off as part of their contract management, right, from the actual officers that are actually leading that contract, that should actually understand what's getting delivered, and so they can apply that. The other thing we'll also notice, just for community benefits, and I think I've mentioned this a few times in the past, is that we've got a cracking relationship with the third sector interface, right? And we've got a little makeup list I've got a list there that's been driven by the communities rather than us saying, oh, we would like X, Y, and Z. And that's a cracking way of actually getting something back that's actually meaningful for the communities. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that was great, and I think the community benefit list is really helpful from the third sector. I was just wondering, do you think we do enough to extract community benefits from the kind of procurement contracts that we lay out, or is there anything more that we could be doing there?
No, I think we're quite. The proper answer to that is no, right? Because I think there is plenty more opportunities to exploit that. I think there's a capacity issue to get it, to be honest with you. I think what I've found is, because I once started writing the report, I said, like, well, why are we doing some of the things that we're doing? It appears that we're, because of the nature of this, the types of work that we're doing at the moment, and we're trying to get there compliant in a proper manner, we're using an awful lot more of the sort of larger national contracts to try and get there. So it's a fully compliant contract. So it doesn't necessarily have the same sort of sensitivities to our local providers. But we have recently tried within quite a large contract, this multi-million-pound contract, to create this environment where if there's a local supplier out there that's not on that framework, we've found a way of getting them onto a framework or our own frameworks, so that we can then start to call off against that. So we're encouraging our local suppliers or our smaller suppliers to get onto some of the big ones, but we've also created a couple of really smart contracts to try and get them onto even our own frameworks, which at face value, you're saying that's a lot of money, I'm not going to get any work from that, it's too big for us. But it's broken down into so many different component parts, is that they're getting a fair crack at it. So yeah, I'm quite chuffed with that, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's great. The other question I've got is, do you think we could be a wee bit more targeted in the community benefits that we might be asking for? I'm thinking about, policies that we have, like the promise. So is there something that we could be kind of, I suppose it's not suitable for every contract, but is there something that we could be maybe building into to maybe say, well, we've got this commitment, if you get this contract, we would expect you to do X, Y, or Z, which would help support the kind of delivery of something like the promise. I go on about it all the time because I'm the promise champion, and I'm always looking for ways to push that forward. But I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there is a way of doing that. And particularly with things like the promise and the UNCHR for the rights of the child as well. There are things going on there that I think we should be able to, or could be able to apply. I think we're quite immature at this point in time. I know community benefits have been out for a while, right? But we're quite immature about trying to build these sort of things into the contracts. We've got a wee bit sharper and smarter recently, where we've specified what it is that we expect. And because of the audits that's highlighted certain things to us, the audit has given us that opportunity to say, right, okay, you've identified that we're maybe not as targeted as we possibly could be. How do we go about changing our processes to try and be more targeted and get that approach right at the outset before we get to the tail end and say, oh, well, what kind of community benefit are you going to give us, right? We're trying to get a bit smarter with that to say, right, okay, right at the beginning, this is what we're after. It's contractual. Tell us how you're going to tell us how you're going to do that. And we've added a percentage into the evaluation for that, so that it can or could sway a contract towards something that has got that somebody's actually providing a good community benefit for us. So there's an element in there that we add. So I think we've added about 10% into the weighting for that.
Ellen, you stole all my questions, but I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for the answers there. But I've got a question from Councillor Coyne. So bear with me to read this out, because I'll try and follow it. So on page 161, we see data that tells us that over 50% of the transactions represent only 2.5% of the value. On page 169, we learn that the transaction cost is roughly £28 per item. By my calculations, this would mean that if we could halve the transactional workload on those low value transactions, we could save about £250,000. What action has taken place or is planned to deal with this? And I hope I explained it okay. When I listen to Councillor Coyne, I think I'm really not an accountant after all, because he explains things so much better. But I hope you understood that okay.
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much. It's no problem. I'm going on the basis of the page that you refer to is about the invoice distribution, which is it's a thing I've always had about in all my life in procurement. I've had an issue with this, even out with here, and I used to set a set value. a number of years ago in another organisation where you couldn't raise an order below a certain level because it was becoming quite obvious that we weren't actually getting value for it, and it was costing more for staff time to actually process the thing than you were actually purchasing. So I have been chipping away at this. And as I think one of your elected members mentioned to me before, a couple of years ago, I'm slightly professionally curious and nosy about what's going on. So I tend to dig into Tech One and say, well, why have you raised 15 orders for 50 quid? And say, look, could you please consolidate them, make it one and or consolidate the invoices to make it easier? It's one of my pet bugs. So it's the sort of thing that I like to keep poking. And I've just done one whilst we were chatting earlier on when I noticed that. I'm saying, why have you raised all these orders? Can you not just do one and get it sorted? So yeah, it's a thing. It's some people see it as being it's the easiest way to manage. It's more granular for them to pick up on it. I don't see it that way. I think it's we're wasting a lot of staff's time, etc. So the more and more we can consolidate. I've also spoken to some of the larger suppliers to say, can you do a consolidated invoice? So you're just getting that one invoice, even though the transactions are maybe smaller as well. And so we've got that with the stationery companies and a couple of the building companies as well. So my pet hate, the councillor, it's one of my things.
No, and you made that so much clearer to me in my head now. So that's like, I totally understand it now. But thanks so much for that. No, that's great. Do we have any other questions? Nope. So I'm happy to move. Like I said, Derek, again, an exemplary paper. It's just fantastic. And, you know, I really appreciate that you've brought out the points that came up in the internal audit as well, because we might have had to come on to that in that paper, but that's been extremely helpful to have that covered too. So again, just the level of detail, it must take so long to pull that report together and so much work from the team and yourself, and really appreciate it. So thanks so much. Could I have a seconder, please, Councillor Forson?
Yeah, happy to second. Like Janine says, Derek, there's obviously a lot of work going into the report, and I think it just highlights the work that goes into procurement. You know, kind of from you and your wee team, across the council. So, good to read it. I'm really pleased to see our kind of continued focus on local spend, the community wealth building side of it. Community benefits for me have just got so much potential moving forward, and it is an area that Janine has said was picked up in the report, and you mentioned that yourself, the internal audit report, but you're on it, and I've got full confidence that we'll, you know, be covering that off, and I'll look forward to seeing maybe developments in that area for next year's report. But thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
And we're now open to debate if anybody would like to debate. Nope, happy to note. Thanks so much, Derek. Really appreciate it. Lovely to see you again, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to Audit and Scrutiny Committee annual report, and I think that's Chris that's taking that for us.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Committee. The paper as tabled presents the Audit and Scrutiny Committee annual report for 2024-25. Committee are asked to note, challenge and comment on the report and agree that the report be presented to the next available meeting of Council. Guidance published by the Chartered Institute of Professional Finance and Accountancy in 2022 is accepted as best practice for local authority audit committees. The guidance recommends that all audit committees should prepare an annual report that provides assurance to all those charged with governance that it fulfills its purpose and can demonstrate its impact. The table report attached in the appendix has been prepared to inform the committee and the council of the work undertaken by this committee during the 24-25 period and to provide that assurance. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee is an integral component of the council's corporate governance framework and provides an independent and high-level focus on the audit, assurance and reporting arrangements that underpin good governance and financial standards. The report is split into a number of sections in order to highlight the important work of committee. Some of the key areas to note: committee met 6 times during the year and all sessions were quorate. During the cycle, committee considered 58 reports, 22 for audit and 36 for scrutiny. A range of briefings and other training opportunities were offered to members during the 24-25 period, although it is recognised that not all elements of the training programme were delivered, although planning is underway to deliver any outstanding items. 5 audit reports were completed to final report stage, and these were reported to committee during the year. Based on the assignments undertaken by internal audit, an overall limited assurance was given in relation to the Council's arrangements for risk management. No reports were submitted by external audit for consideration during the period. The Council's corporate risk register is presented quarterly for robust scrutiny, and the 24-25 year-end update on the Council's corporate risk register was considered by the committee on the 17th of April. The corporate performance report was also presented to committee in April 2025. And during the financial year period, 15 exceptions to contract standing orders were noted by committee, which amounted to just over 2.4 million. 6 monthly reports were also produced and presented to committee by Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue, in line with the requirements set out in the Police and Fire Reform Scotland Act 2012. A number of other reports were considered by committee through the year, including the Procurement Annual Report, Health and Safety Annual Report, the Chief Social Workers Report, Financial Performance, Treasury Management, Portfolio Business Plan Updates, HSEP Locality Performance. A key element of the committee's self-reflection is the annual self-evaluation review. This year, the self-assessment took place on the 16th of September 2025. And overall, committee agreed with the statements as presented, noting a number of actions which are presented in the paper at section 12. The annual report also includes the views of both the chair and the vice chair to indicate the confidence of the committee, that the confidence of the committee aligns with the SIPFAS position statement, and that work undertaken by the committee fulfills the remit and offers reasonable assurance regarding the control environment, risk management systems, and the overall governance framework operated effectively. However, the chair and vice chair highlighted that the level of assurance remains as limited, but are assured that senior officers are taking steps to address the identified weaknesses. The chair and vice chair outlined that the committee will continue to play an important role to ensure appropriate actions are progressed during 25-26. And I'm happy to take any questions that committee members may have on the review of the committee's performance ahead of the paper being moved.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Councillor Forson.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I'll just go. I'll do them, and then you can answer, and I can ask the next one. So the report kind of notes that the corporate risk register and performance regularly come to committee, and we scrutinise that. I was just wondering, is there any evidence that the scrutiny provided by the committee is actually, you know, kind of making change happen where there are risk and kind of performance? And have you got any examples maybe where, you know, kind of questions or issues raised by the committee is actually kind of informing change?
So there were concerns around the committee that the indicators and the risk values weren't changing, particularly every time it came up to committee. So the Risk and Integrity Forum now meets regularly, and the owners of the risk are asked to update those. And I think one of the Councillor Coyne had previously asked that maybe we focus on 1 or 2 risks coming forward, and we'll include that in the corporate risk paper, so that assurance is there for committee to note that actions and the comments that they're feeding back are being taken on board and are actually be actioned.
Could I come in just briefly there as well? I think one of the things I've noted as chair is that although, like, you know, you're specifically questioning the kind of risk side, I think even just on the strength of the health and safety report that we saw coming forward, we're seeing some substantial change coming through from where we kind of start, well, where I started, I guess, as chair. I'm starting to see some real movement coming forward now in terms of we are seeing that the questions that we're answering, I mean, Councillor Coyne has asked on quite a few occasions, can we really see some really good evidence and reports as to how things are moving? And we're seeing that coming through, and I know there's plans on some of the reports coming up to committee in the future to really look at those changes. So I think we're starting to see a fair bit of movement coming forward.
I would also, Sharice reminds me that we used to only report the risk twice a year to committee, but now it comes through on a quarterly basis. And we have seen some movement on the corporate risk register. A number of risks came off the register, and a number have come onto it. And there's scrutiny through the business plans as well that come through Audit and Scrutiny Committee, as well as just the Corporate Risk Register itself.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. And the other thing I was thinking, you know, we scrutinise kind of partnership reports. So today we've had the fire and the police reports, and we kind of raise issues and we kind of probe areas. Do we think that, you know, the scrutiny we put on them has much effectiveness? Have we ever seen some, you know, kind of an area where they might change or actually kind of take on board that things like the committee said? So, for example, for as long as I can remember, we've been raising things like parking, and the with the audit and scrutiny with kind of partners. We've been raising antisocial behaviour. Do we think that us providing that kind of scrutiny on those areas actually prompts them to put more focus on this, or is there something that we can be doing maybe to follow up, to maybe highlight that we expect to see something different from that? Because sometimes it's almost like, here are the reports from, you know, kind of partners, we do it and then they go off and then next year they just provide the report again, if you know what I mean.
I suppose it's a difficult one to ask, and maybe it'd been a question for the police and for the fire, but I think we've got a strong commitment from Des and from Gary Smith there in terms of their commitment to following through on some of those. And I know that Kat Thompson, when she was on, she'd had issues around the parking as well. There were comments around that the council need to obviously decriminalise it, but obviously the police have a role in terms of the powers that they have in terms of enforcement. And we'd hope that the committee are able to fully scrutinise and ask the question. I think we've seen police get quite a deep dive into terms of their reports and the scrutiny of it. Fire maybe not so as much as our police colleagues. I suppose it is a difficult one. I don't know, Sheree, do you want to come in on?
Yeah, I mean, council under the Fire Scotland Reform Act approved the local fire plan and the police plans. Is within the gift of Manager Council to shape the information and the priorities that are coming forward for scrutiny through audit and scrutiny processes. So perhaps that's something that we can revisit with both police and fire. But I think just in terms of my own observations, I think both police and fire have been fairly flexible in the types of information that they include in their reports based on questions that have been raised previously at audit and scrutiny. So I think they have been willing to go away and explore certain themes, particularly parking's one that has been raised a few times. And I think they have been quite flexible in terms of including more information the next reporting period. But yeah, I just wanted to make the point that the priorities that the police are shaping their audit and scrutiny reports on are within the gift of council to agree and influence.
Yeah, the other thing I was maybe going to, I suppose, probe a wee bit was the community planning partnership. You know, they've both kind of given commitments to fully engage in that sort of thing. But we do know that partnership engagement in the community planning partnership can be sporadic, and we find that quite frustrating, particularly when we're trying to drive forward issues. So is there maybe a role for the committee, this committee, the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, to do a bit of work around about the community planning partnership? Because I'm just thinking, who scrutinises that?
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry. I think that's a really good point that Councillor Forson raises, and previously Audit and Scrutiny has received a report on community planning and on the progress that Community Planning Partnership is making on delivering the local outcome improvement plan. And the way that we did that previously was myself and some partners presented to Audit and Scrutiny to present the report and to take any questions. It's something we could revisit. I think the challenges we perhaps encountered was, Audit and Scrutiny perhaps marking their own homework a little bit, but it's certainly something we could revisit in terms of bringing that report back. I think that would strengthen community planning and the scrutiny of community planning.
Yeah, I think it's something we could definitely follow up to make sure you've raised those actions today, Ellen. I think we could look to see if there is improvement in terms of engagement, like with the upcoming development event and so on, to see if there is attendance at that and if the points we've raised actually do move forward as well. So it's something when we come back to the next report, we can follow up and say, this was an action point, was it followed? You raise an interesting point, because I think it might be useful for us as a committee to look at the action points we've raised at previous meetings and actually follow up to see if those points have been actioned in any way or how they've been actioned. So actually to have a process in place to do that.
Yeah, that's something myself and Helena and the Committee Services Committee will look in terms of almost an action log type mechanism if there's any actions arising out of committee. But obviously committee are commenting and noting, and they're not necessarily approving, but there are actions that we want to feedback, then we can do that on a half-yearly or a quarterly basis in terms of anything that needs to be reported and come back to committee, just for reassurance.
Do you know, that's probably something as well that I think we've been discussing with Phil, that we probably need on the council agenda as well, not just this one. So see when actions are agreed, etc., that there's a wee bit of a rolling log there to make sure things are kind of followed up on, and when they come off, they come off. So I think it'd be helpful for this, but probably for council as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you. Do we have any other questions? No. Thanks for all your work on this paper. I'm happy to move this paper, Chris, and I realise how much work goes into pulling this together every year, and bringing us all together is not always an easy challenge. So thank you for that. And just as I've noted in the report, I would stress again to members the importance of engagement in these processes. You know, and not just to be the same people every time that we get the whole committee involved. So just to have that noted, but happy to move, and MD happy to second. Yep, Ellen.
Aye, happy to second. As Janine says, a lot of work goes on there, and a big thanks to Morgan for all the chasing up, particularly in relation to all the self-evaluation stuff. I think she must have been continually at that for a long time. But a lot of good information in there, and I think the committee is, you know, it's making a lot of progress, and we're definitely developing and kind of gelling a lot more, and probably a wee bit more probing and getting into the issues. So it's certainly a committee that I enjoy being a member of. So thanks.
Thanks, Ellen. We're open to debate. Do you like to debate? Nope. Happy to note? Yep. Okay. So we'll move on to item 11, Council Financial Performance 25-26, as at June 2025, and that is Lindsay. Over to Lindsay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just checking the time. This paper provides an update on the financial performance for the Council for the year ended 31st of March 2026, based on actual spend for the first quarter of the year to June. The General Fund revenue is forecasting an underspend of 422,000 for the year, with a summary of the position across directorates provided in Appendix 1 and full detail of the spend by service area and forecast movements provided in Appendices 3 to 6. To note, the outturn for place includes a budget pressure for temporary accommodation within homeless. Previously, this pressure was split across place and partnership performance due to the related income from the DWP that was recorded within the revenue section. However, for transparency, it's now being reported within the housing section in totality, reflecting that this is a service directing the spend. A summary of earmarked reserves is provided in table 4.6 of the report, which shows opening committed reserves at the 1st of April of just over 16 million. Earmarked reserves include funding and income with specific terms and conditions, funding that has been committed for specific council priorities, and funding to cover projects not completed the previous year. Spend may be committed against those projects, however, the budget is only drawn down when the actual spend is incurred. So as at June, 1.5 million has been drawn down, leaving a balance of 4.7 at June. The Clerk Management element of the Health and Social Care Partnership is forecasting an overspend for the year of 6.9 million as at the end of June. The General Fund Capital Programme is forecasting an underspend of 5.2 million across various projects. A summary of the forecast per asset plan is provided at section 6.4 of the report, and detail by project is provided in Appendix 8. In relation to savings, the Council is forecast to deliver 3.1 million of the approved 3.8 million, which equates to 82%. A further 390,000 are identified as at risk and will continue to be pursued during the year, and 308,000 have been identified as not achievable this financial year. Details of individual savings are included in Appendix 2. Happy to take any questions on the paper, along with colleagues from each of the directorates. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. That's, again, a really comprehensive paper. Lots of work going into that in terms of showing us all the different elements with the savings and so on. My main question is really around the Health and Social Care Partnership, where we've got basically another overspend, and we're sort of well into the financial year now, and I just wondered, I know that there's elements of a recovery plan to recover some of that, and I wondered how much influence and control Clackmannshire Council have in ensuring that we're not left with a big overspend at the end of the year again.
Thank you. Yeah, so as the report notes, there's an overspend, quite significant overspend within the Clackmannshire and Stirling elements, and also the partnership is projecting an overspend. So it's not just in Clackmannshire, Stirling are also projecting an overspend, as is Health. There is a recovery plan that was put in place when the budget was set to identify savings and take forward those savings to try and reduce the budget and close that budget gap. However, it was recognised there was still a further gap after those savings would be achieved. So there's an ongoing recovery action plan that's been taken through the IJB and in conjunction with councils. So obviously the staff that are employed by either of the partners that employed the IJB, so they have a responsibility to take forward the savings. And the managers are signed up to delivering the savings as well. So that's been monitored. So there is a degree of influence in terms of myself as the CFO and the CFOs from the other two partners for Health and Stirling. We were regularly meeting with the CFO of the IJB to look at the recovery plan and look at the financial position and look to see what other mitigations can be put in place to try and bring that in line. But as you can imagine, it is quite a significant overspend that will be challenging to bring in by the end of the year.
Yes, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Coyne. So he has asked, are all earmarked reserves on a use it or lose it basis, or are there some that, if not fully required, can be repurposed by council decision?
Thank you. So as I mentioned in the introduction, there are differing conditions around each of the earmarked reserves, and the ones detailed in the table tend to have terms and conditions around them that limit the use of those funds. But also some are multi-year funds. So if I take the Transformation Fund as an example, that's an amount that's been set aside to fund our transformation programme, which is a multi-year programme, and there are commitments against that. So the plans that come through the Be the Future board indicate what commitments are against that transformation fund and how they phase out over the number of years of the transformation plan. So it's not a case of use it or lose it for a lot of these. So as I said, they're multi-year and they are reviewed annually as well by myself and by directors. So we take a review of each of them, check which ones are subject to terms and conditions, which ones that we may have to pay back. So if it's Scottish Government funding that we've not spent, there might be a strict restriction and that might need to be paid back, or we might have the ability to carry that forward. But if there's ones that are within the council's control, then we take a view on whether that can be repurposed for additional things or whether it's still required for the original intended purpose.
Thank you. I've got another from Councillor Coyne. Rolling capital budgets forward put strain on human resources and equipment. Are the carry forwards getting bigger every year?
There has been a trend of significant underspend in the capital programme across a number of years for the council, and we have been looking to increase the scrutiny and the review of the business cases that support the capital plan. However, there's a lot of areas that are not within our influence and our control that mean that these underspends occur. So if there is rephasing, a lot of the projects are multi-year projects. So the Wellbeing Hub, for example, the City Region deal, They are phased over a number of years, and the timing of that means that they could slip into the next year, and that's not entirely within the council's control. There are other projects that, due to other priorities or capacity reasons, we know we have recruitment challenges at the moment to take forward some of those posts, to take forward some of the work, and also there's complex procurement that's required for some of these contracts because they are such significant high value projects. So that all adds to potential delays and risks of delays within these projects and the resulting carry forwards of the programme. So there is, I can't say if there's been an increase because I don't have the figures in front of me, but I do know that there is usually an amount of carry forward each year that we try to get behind, but with the best of intentions, there are things again out with our control as well as in our control that mean that that's not going to be possible to spend the budgets in year.
Okay, thanks so much, Lindsay. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, happy to move the paper again. I realise how much work goes into pulling all this together, and it was really useful for us, I think, to see the level of savings that have been achieved, but also see the detail behind that. So I think it's really good for us as a committee to be able, for our scrutiny to be able to see that. And but I realise there's a lot of work goes into that. So thanks so much, Lindsay. So like I say, happy to move. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Errol, just formally move, second, yeah. Yep, so open to debate. Do you like to debate the paper? Nope. Okay, thank you. Happy to note the paper. Great, thank you. So we'll move on to item 12, HRA Financial Performance 25-26 as at June 2025. And that's you again, Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you. So similarly, this paper provides an update on the financial performance for the housing revenue account for the year ended 31st of March 26, based on actual spend for the first quarter to June. So the revenue element is forecasting a surplus of 5.045 million, which is 389 million greater than budgeted. So the main driver of this underspend is within staffing costs due to vacancies. However, the forecast also includes the impact of the additional 1% pay award, which was agreed above the 3% budgeted amount, which is being funded by in-year underspends, as there is no additional funding received from Scottish Government to the HRA. So detail of the over and underspends by subjective area are provided in Appendix 1. The capital programme is forecasting an underspend of 1.275 million across various projects and is proposed to be carried forward. The report asks the committee to recommend council to approve a variant to transfer funds from the Safe Electrical programme to the window replacement programme, and that's to fund additional costs of replacement windows due to a change in work plan. The report provides a summary of the main projects contributing to this underspend, and detail by project is provided in Appendix 2. The report also contains the findings of the review into the overspend on the 23-24 capital programme and the actions that have been put in place to mitigate this in future. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the paper along with colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. I just really wanted to tease out in terms of we've been asked to note and recommend for council approval to move the spend from electrical testing programme to window replacement programme. I just wanted a bit of assurance, really, that obviously when you say safe electrical programme, it can lead to a bit of concern in terms of whether that means that there would be any risk or whether that is something that would be just straightforward to deal with.
Not sure if Kevin, you want to answer that?
Kevin, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Chair. In relation to the point you raised, Councillor Rennie, the reason why we're able to make this switch, and I'll explain why there's a need for a switch as well, is that we introduced a different methodology that allowed us then to compartmentalise the elements of the electrical works that need done. So that if there's a fault in a particular area, we're only replacing one aspect of it rather than the whole changeover, which is actually allowing us to create the efficiencies that we're seeing and allow us then to divert the money and to cover the window replacement. So this move won't put any additional risk to our properties in terms of that. There will still be resource within it to address any electrical issues that come up or within this fiscal year. And the reason why we require the additional environment is that in terms of the change in programming where we are actually replacing, the style of the window replacements is actually in a preserved area, so therefore it's actually more expensive than some of the standard windows that we've been putting in traditionally that we'd originally planned for in that sense, so hence the need for the environment. We believe that it's a safe method and a safe area in which there's for us to swap over whilst maintaining the overall programme that we are working towards. This is something that has been looked at as part of the work within the Future Homes Board that is referred to as well as the additional measure that we've put in place in terms of monitoring our programme of works improvements and our financial spend, and certainly is something that we're monitoring on a regular basis. So I'm just hoping that that gives a bit of context as well as assurance in the other areas within the report. Thank you.
No, thanks, Kevin. That gives reassurance, I think, to me, certainly. So thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions? No. No.
So you stole my thunder, Janine.
Yeah, no, I think we would all be concerned about that. So thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to move this paper again. It's really excellent to see the amount of work that's going on within the HRA. So it's excellent to see this report and all the detail within it. So thanks to those who have pulled that together. So happy to move. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Errol?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to second that. As you say, a tremendous amount of work, and the question on electrical safety is one that we cannot really just shrug aside, like, you know, it's too dangerous. It's far too dear. The window replacements, well, it's an excellent programme that started a number of years ago, and I think we've just got to continue with it. So I'm happy to second it.
Okay, we're open to debate. Would anybody like to debate the paper? No. So are we happy to note and also recommend that we take this forward for council approval?
Recommend environment.
Yep. We happy with that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we're on to our last item, which is the internal audit progress report. And that is going to be presented by, oh goodness, I've lost my papers again. For some reason, I do this so much better in committee. Sarah McPhee.
Thank you, Davina. Thought was getting away with it then by not just hiding. The purpose of our paper is to summarise the work internal audit have undertaken over the course of the year so far, and also to report on and comment on our compliance with the global internal audit standards, which we refer to as GIAS. Section 3 of the paper details progress of completing the audit plan for 2025-26 and the completion of the audit plan for 24-25. Section 4 of the paper provides details of the ongoing work in order to maintain compliance with the global internal audit standards. Appendix 3 provides a summary of the progress against the agreed internal audit plan for 25-26, and Appendix 2 provides summaries of each of an internal audit assignments that have previously not been presented to Audit and Scrutiny Committee for the completion of the 24-25 plan, and Appendix 3 provides a summary of completed internal audit assignment from the 25-26 internal audit plan. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks very much. That's been really, really helpful. And I think what was excellent was that, you know, we managed to get some of the questions answered on the procurement report. I think that was going to be one of my main questions, but that's been covered, I think. In terms of the access to buildings area, which I had some concerns about, I mean, it was good to know that somebody was challenged as soon as they entered Alva Academy, but it was still a bit of a worry that they were able to enter Alva Academy. So I'm glad that's been highlighted and hopefully followed up. But also, I was really concerned about there was no insurance in terms of access to Forth Bank Roads Depot, and I just wondered what sort of monitoring there is of the follow-up on these important areas to ensure that, or whether that's your role or within the services, and whether we should be asking those questions to the committee.
If you don't mind, I'll let Kevin come in this one, because he's obviously his area and he'll have a better understanding of what he's got planned.
Yep, Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the monitoring of this, we give regular updates through Pintana, but I would like to say that I was equally disappointed in terms of the result for the roads depot, and that given the fact that this isn't the first time that it has occurred, that actually previously it hasn't improved. In that sense, I've instructed the Senior Manager for Environment to take immediate action in relation to that. We are also moving the roads depot currently from where it currently is to the Forth Bank Recycling Centre, which I know has a secured entry mechanism in terms of the building, and it's also further in within the site in terms of its working routes, which would also make it more difficult for people just to wander into. So there are some measures that were taken with immediate effect, as well as actually addressing some of the deficiencies that have been raised through the internal audit exercise with staff, all of which will be monitored through myself in terms of the management team within Police Department, as well as reported on Pintana as part of the regular review process. And I would be expecting this to have a significant improvement in any future exercises of this nature, but it has been monitored closely, and I share your disappointment as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on following up in terms of assurance that actions have been progressed. So we have been bringing back to committee on a 6-monthly basis progress on the internal audit actions. It was previously outstanding actions, but as internal audit have been undertaking further work, we're adding on other new findings and recommendations onto that report. So committee will have scrutiny over the actions and the recommendations and the progress of these. So as Kevin said, obviously it goes through Pintana, but we'll extract that from Pintana to provide a comprehensive report to the committee. The next report is due in December, so we should see progress on a number of these. I know in terms of the capital audit, there was one grade 1 recommendation in terms of the community benefits. There were 2 grade 1 recommendations. They'll be the focus. They need immediate action. The grade 2 recommendations don't require prompt but not immediate action. But we will be providing assurance and continued update on these to committee, as I say, on a 6-monthly basis.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. I have a question from Councillor Coyne. Page 266 top, was the review of purchase order arrangements not a high priority given the background of continual overspends?
It was a high priority, but we had other audit work come in at the time in that year, which had to take preference to that work, which was presented as an exempt paper in previous audit committees. We are almost at the conclusion of that audit. I've actually finished reading that report this morning, so that hopefully shouldn't be long coming out as a completed audit. We've just got a couple of closing meetings to do, and then it'll go for a final review stage before it comes out, but it really isn't a million miles away now.
Okay, thank you. Chris, will you want to come in on that as well?
Oh, sorry, Chair, a legacy hand, apologies.
Legacy hand. There's always one in one meeting, so that's it. That's fine. So do we have any other questions? Nope.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. So happy to move the report. It's always excellent to see the level of detail that you prepare for us. Really happy to see that. And I think I've shot ahead of myself. Councillor Coyne has come in. I'm sorry, with patience with me. It's just the message came in just at the last minute there. Page 271 makes a strong comment on procurement. What traction do internal audit feel they're getting on the points raised?
We don't ideally go back immediately and look at these points. We give the services chance to implement anything they've got, and we will look at anything that's outstanding on Pentana, which Chris has already mentioned will get reported to committee on a 6-monthly basis. I tend to go into Pentana on a regular basis and review what the comments have been against any of these recommendations, and that's when we can see what traction has been done by the service. But we don't find it as beneficial to be on their case immediately. We have to give them a chance to follow through what they say they're going to do.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to come in this time?
Yeah, just on that. So in terms of the audit that was undertaken with regards to procurement, there were 14 recommendations that came out of that. 2 were grade 1, 9 were grade 2, and 3 were grade 3. Of the 2 grade 1, so we received the final report on the 2nd of September. So just over a month and a bit ago, maybe a couple of months ago. And I know in terms of one of the grade 1 recommendations was publicising and reviewing the procurement strategy. That's in the P&P business plan, and Derek made reference to that in the annual procurement report that we touched on. The other grade 1 was in terms of the community benefits, and Derek touched on that. And so that's been actioned and progressed. So those 2 are underway. And Derek, I know, will be moving forward in the grade 2. So there has been immediate work being taken forward on those that have come out of that internal audit.
Thanks very much. Derek, were you wanting to come in, or are you okay with what Chris has covered?
This is pretty much covered it, but thanks very much for that. But I mean, we do take it seriously. I like audits, so that might be sad, right? But I actually do quite like to see a good audit, right? I think when you've got an audit team that are resilient and do the things that they do, right, it highlights issues, and if you don't know that there's an issue to address, then you can't deal with it. So I'm fully in compliance with what's been said here. Take it totally seriously. We know it's getting tracked through Pentana and the actions report, and we know that there's going to be an update for it. I've already actioned some of the stuff that's come out of that, and just to give you a wee bit further insight, my procurement strategy is not that far away. I'll probably be circulating it around all the elected members as well for some input, but it's close to being finished, so you should be seeing something before it comes to committee in the very near future.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Apologies for the back and forth. It's just that Councillor Coyne and I are communicating by WhatsApp while we're going on, so it's so we'll move back to moving the paper. So I mean, I always want to say just how impressed I am with the level of transparency we have in terms of being able to scrutinise these issues when they arise, and the level of detail that internal audit provide us is extremely helpful for us as a committee to get the background. It's not just a report saying there were assurance issues. We get the detail as to why. So again, we really appreciate that and your attendance at these meetings. So thank you so much. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Errol, is that just a formal?
Yeah, I'm a formal seconder.
Okay, thanks. We're open to debate. Do you like to debate the paper? Nope, we're happy to note.
Yep.
So that's the end of the meeting. Thanks for everybody's patience today. It's been a wee bit of a challenge back and forth, and hopefully my health will be back to normal for the next committee meeting in December, and we'll be back to seeing each other face to face again. But thanks for your patience today. I really appreciate it. And all have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.